The first female candidate for the position of Wake County Sheriff in North Carolina. It's very nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time to come
Scott,
down.
Thanks
to
for
talk
having
to
me.
us. Absolutely. So we met in kind of under interesting circumstances. I was ranting as I usually am online, and I got a little more emotional than usual. And I posted something along the lines of, well, if the government starts overreaching and law enforcement starts enforcing tyrannical mandates to such a degree that it resembles something like Australia, they're going to find the rifle behind every blade of grass, sort of the old Japanese quote.
Yep.
And you piped up and you basically said, this is what I'm so concerned about. This is why I want to talk to you and others like you. And so we shook hands on it and decided to have you come in and do an interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do have a series of questions for you, just to help people get to know who you are and also get a sense of what your platform is and some of the things that you have, hopefully ideas on how to deal with the current situation going on in Wake County, North Carolina, as far as law enforcement is concerned.
Yeah. And as soon as you said that, my platform went blank in my head. So we'll just go with it. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe the questions will bring it back.
Yeah.
You. So, what prompted you to run for sheriff in the first place?
Well, obviously just witnessing and seeing everything going on and, everything that happened last summer in Wake County and downtown and just seeing, I like you, I sat there watching television and seeing the police being forced to stand down and not protecting businesses and whatnot. And the sheriff he did not do his job. The sheriff could have, came in and said, no, we're going to protect these businesses. We're going to protect these people's livelihoods.
Right. It was kind of shockingly bad, actually. And at the time I was working in the department, I was a detention officer, so I wasn't a road officer. So I didn't actually have to deal with the riots myself, but I had to deal with the rioters when they got brought into the jail. And that was an interesting experience in its own way.
And protecting the jail in itself. I mean, I'm sure there was a concern there, and I'm sure that inside they know what's going on outside. So it revs them up as well.
Right. And so there was a lot of media blackouts that took place whenever things were happening downtown or whatever, like a shooting happened where there was a white shooter, whether it was an officer or a civilian, and there was a black victim. That was always a news blackout.
Sure.
They wouldn't deliver the papers those days. They wouldn't say why. We had to deal with a lot of riots in our own. A lot of people don't realize that it wasn't just like the downtown areas when all the BLM and Antifa stuff was going on. They also targeted a lot of government buildings, and the jail was one of them. Correct. So we had to constantly get escorted or have to deal with going through a bunch of protesters just to go into work. So getting back to, your platform and what you're up to, many of your opponents on both sides of the political aisle have more experience so it appears on paper, right? On paper and in law enforcement. So why should voters pull a lever for you rather than those opponents who allegedly have more bona fides for this particular job?
Well, like we just said, on paper, a lot of people look great, but we don't know what's inside their heart. I know what's inside my heart, and I know what my intentions are, and my intentions are for the people. We need to work for the people. That's, the people vote me in, right? That's who I answer to.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize too, is that a sheriff's position is not like a promotion from, say, major or another like sort of paramilitary position. The sheriff is the highest administrator and the highest ranking officer, yes, but they're still an elected person, right? Correct. Like the president, to use an extreme example, is the head of the military, but that doesn't mean that they have to actually have any military experience to be qualified for the job. Correct. Right. So with that in mind, I think a lot of people going into it should realize that while law enforcement experience can be good and beneficial, I don't know that it's necessarily the be all end all.
No, I mean, the thing is, like you said, as far as the sheriff being elected and brought in by the people, right? It's not something that's promoted. So you're basing your vote, your voting decision is based upon what I tell you about myself, right? And I can't speak for all the guys that are running. I can't. I don't know what's in their heart. I don't know what's in their mind. I do know a couple of the guys that are running alongside me. I don't want to say they're running against me. I feel that I'm running alongside them because, as a lifelong conservative, a constitutional conservative, I would like to think that they feel that, that their intentions are just like mine, but I don't know that they are,
Well, you know what you have and what you plan to do. That makes sense. So speaking of that, what problems do you see specifically with the department in Wake County Sheriff's Department, and what are some possible solutions that you have to offer?
Well, for starters, not many people want to hear about the budget, right? But that's one of the main concerns. Sure. is the budget. They have a budget of $108 million. And from my understanding, Sheriff Baker has completely ravaged it. Just very, very frivolous with his
experimental his weapons that they can't use.
There you go.
Specialized equipment that doesn't really get action.
Absolutely. He has a bulletproof vehicle. I believe that was $120,000 roughly.
Kind of like a Colombian drug lord.
I guess. I don't know why he feels like he needs it. But I know that his deputies don't have that same luxury.
Oh God, no.
And they're the ones that are out patrolling.
Right.
But as far as the budget goes, and I don't know if you know this or not, his salary is $185,000 a year. Just to put that into perspective, our governor earns $141,000. Okay.
Okie dokie.
So you're looking at someone who runs the state compared to someone who runs, yes, it is the largest county, compared, in comparison, that's astronomical difference, right? So once elected, I am requesting an $85,000 pay cut. The average sheriff makes $110,000 a year. I want to bring it down to $100,000, and I want to put that $85,000 back into the budget. I'm also going to auction off his car and put that back into the budget as well. I think that's ridiculous. So whoever wants that, maybe we can sell it to a Colombian drug lord. I don't know.
Yeah, you might get a good price.
Yeah.
Speaking of Sheriff Baker,
yes,
he ran, I believe, on a Democratic-supported kind of anti-Trump mandate.
Sure.
He was clearly riding an anti-Trump wave, and there was a lot of other elections that happened in other places where it seemed to have that same momentum for the same reason.
Sure.
I also believe that race played a huge role in him getting elected. Donnie Harrison, the previous sheriff before Baker was elected, he was smeared as a bigot and kind of like a good old boy. Mm-hmm. And despite years of really good service and multiple reelections, which meant obviously all people from all different demographics trusted him to do his job. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden now he's a bigot, now he's out, right? Okay. And how do you intend to win over the Black and Democrat voters when there's such a powerful kind of leftist agenda at play?
If I can just touch on that, I will say this. Donnie Harrison is not a bigot. I myself am not a bigot. It's so easy to claim that, right? It's so easy to say, they're white. They wear, a police badge. They wear a uniform. They must be a bigot.
Sure.
So let me just put that out there about Donnie. He's a great person. I consider him a friend. As far as getting the Democrats to understand where we're coming from, they need to understand that this isn't about right. This isn't about left. This is about all of us. And once the Democrats start to realize that their rights are being taken away, believe it or not, most Democrats are conservative. They're secret Republicans in my book. They are. A lot of them are conservative. They're God-fearing Christians. And I think now they're starting to wake up a little bit more and more. And I think they're realizing, Sheriff Baker was obviously not the right choice. I think a lot of them assumed that he was related to John Baker, who served for 26 years.
That was a mistake I often heard even from officers. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that was one thing that they were riding on as well. Okay. Lack of education, just lack of knowledge about, who you're putting into that position. And I don't know, you said you worked at the jail.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So did you know that Sheriff Baker was let go? He was forced to resign from his position in the courthouse when he was a sergeant. And then he turned around and ran for...
There were rumors that swirled about him on a number of different topics, but I always just attribute it to rumors. But that particular bit of information, I was never told. No.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, you just never know who you're putting into office. And unfortunately, for Donnie, he did lose for many reasons, and definitely that was...
One of the critiques of his campaigning was that he got too comfortable and he just kind of assumed it was in the bag.
And ran on his name
multiple times.
Yep.
And he didn't really push it back against the smears.
Yes.
And that's a critique that I've made myself.
I happen to agree with that.
Okay.
I think if you're being smeared, you have to respond.
Yeah.
You need to respond. It's important as a public official. He is a public figure in this community, and a lot of people look up to him, and he absolutely should have addressed that in a big way.
Yeah, I agree. There was something you said to me in our initial discussions when we were just talking online.
Yeah.
You mentioned that one of the things that was a top priority to you as far as implementing programs was constitutional training, or at least increased knowledge of the Constitution for new deputies and detention officers when they go through the academy. Can you
Yeah.
care to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So that kind of, coincides with, I know that you and I were discussing CRT as well, and how that's going to affect, our officers coming in. The newer officers that are coming in, whether it be deputy sheriffs or city cops, a lot of this younger generation, they're already coming in indoctrinated, right? They're coming in indoctrinated. Civics has been pulled from most high schools, government classes, learning about our country, our history, the Constitution. A lot of that has been pulled. And that goes to show you last summer and what's happening right now. A mandate is not a law, right? Correct. I would never approach someone and say, I'm going to place you under arrest because you don't have a mask on, or I'm going to trespass you for being on this property without a mask.
Well, but before you finish that question about Constitution, I would like to ask about that. Like, this is one of my deep personal concerns is that when it comes to mask and COVID vaccinations, passports, that sort of thing, the movement licenses, however you want to phrase it.
Right.
As the sheriff, will these be things that you will enforce, and to what extent?
I will never enforce any kind of vaccine mandate, mask mandate. Absolutely not. It's not a law. How can I enforce something that isn't on the books? It's absolutely unconstitutional. Your health, your personal choice is none of my business.
Good to know. But
getting back to
sidetrack you, the constitutional training.
That's okay.
Right?
So I think it's extremely important for not only the deputies coming, because a lot of the detention officers, they are put into the academy. They move forward from being a detention officer and put into the academy to become a deputy sheriff. I think it's extremely important this is what I plan on doing. I'm going to implement a constitutional course. It's not going to be just touching on it. It's going to be a questionnaire. Once you apply to be a deputy sheriff, I want to know, what do you know about the Constitution? What do you know before I even tell you anything?
Interesting.
Okay. Then, because most of them aren't going to know very much, implement that into the course or into the class, into the academy, test them again once it's said and done. Because how can you take an oath for something that you don't understand? How can you take an oath for something that you have no knowledge of? You can't. And then you turn around and take away someone's liberty. That is completely just mind-blowing to me. So guess what? If you don't pass, you don't get a badge, you don't get a gun. It's as simple as that.
You mentioned briefly, too, the role of CRT and anti-racism training. What role, if any, will that play in your administration should you be elected?
There will be no role. You mean as far as like...
Will you be integrating any kind of CRT or anti-racism training in the academies?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
All right.
No.
Now,
there's a difference with, may I say this? There are ways of implementing like verbal judo, how to speak to someone from a different culture than you, how to speak to someone like you're a man, right?
Sure.
And say you're an officer and I'm a woman and I've just been raped. Don't you feel that certain questions you ask me and the way you approach me as a woman who's just been violated, don't you feel as a man you have to tread lightly and know what to say and how to say it?
Yeah, there's also going to definitely be the risk of them kind of viewing you as the perpetrator, depending on how recent the attack was.
Correct.
That association is difficult. That's why I think female officers tend to want to be on site for that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, female officers are extremely important.
So what you're saying is you would like to integrate more in terms of practical methods that we can talk to one another, different genders, different cultural groups, different ethnicities, from a practical law enforcement standpoint, but you would focus less on like sort of the Ibram X. Kendi, all white people are racist. You all need to get past your unconscious biases and whatnot.
Right. Okay. Exactly.
All right. Well, I have to ask this question, as stupid as it sounds, because it's now become such a hot button topic. And I know for a fact, I should say anecdotally, because I'm not holding, affidavits in my hand.
That's okay.
But Sheriff Baker essentially would sit in on the panel interviews for all the new hires, and he would ask them a question if they were part of a certain ethnic group, and he would basically say, "Are you a racist?" But he would only ask these questions of white officers. And so
not only whites can be racist.
Well, yeah, with that I agree, but there's a lot of people who would argue that that's not true. Do you believe that all white officers are inherently racist?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No. Absolutely not.
All right. I had to ask.
Of course. No, absolutely.
Because there's a lot of people who might disagree with you.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who disagree with me. However, I mean, I don't even see how that would be possible. I really don't.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Now, as far as promotion, one of the big sticking points and one of the issues that's causing the jail specifically, I don't know about the road side, the deputy side, but the detention side specifically was a revolving door when I worked there because one of many reasons, but one of the reasons was no promotional potential. Unless you were like inside the Baker fan club or you knew the admin or there was some kind of like something going on behind the scenes.
It's all who you know. Yeah.
Everybody with bars on their shoulders would essentially tell you when you asked, hey, what about promotions? What should I do to prepare for a promotion? I'd love to be a sergeant some days or certain things I should be doing, studying. They would all say ain't going to happen.
Would they explain why?
When I asked them to elaborate, and this happened probably about 7 or 8 times from different officers of higher rank, they would say things like, well, Baker has removed the testing option. He has basically made it arbitrary. He essentially handpicks them where his flunkies do. And there is no panel interview. There is no written test as there's supposed to be. There is no specific criteria that you even have to meet. And unfortunately, we witnessed firsthand people getting demoted, several ranks,
fired.
We're not exactly sure why. Rumors abound.
I mean, how many? Look how many people he fired in his first 100 days. 40, I mean, it was like 50.
And then a lot of people retired early, which I think is basically the same thing. They just didn't want to deal with it.
They didn't want to deal with it.
But so. The reason I brought all that up is will you promote officers based on merit and performance, or do you have another standard such as demographic makeup?
You will always promote based on merit and performance. Always.
Another issue that, and speaking of the jail specifically, I don't know, again, how the county was allotting funding for the deputies, but on the detention side, funding always seemed to be earmarked for someone else when we needed it. It's often cited as one of the biggest issues in Wake County when people refer to law enforcement in general when I have these discussions. But we're a wealthy county. We have a really big jail.
Yep.
Where's the money going?
We pay a lot of taxes.
Right. Where's the money going?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
And I won't know exactly where it's going until
you get those books.
Until I get those books.
Okay.
But
I thought maybe you knew something I didn't.
I can promise you, he's been very frivolous and very irresponsible.
Sheriff Baker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's nice to know.
Yeah.
So let's say you get elected and you get those books in front of you. How do you plan on balancing the budget? Do you have things you want to add, things you want to cut?
There are, like I said, there are things that are going to be implemented, like the Constitution course, right? Will I have to cut something out to cover that, something I feel that is less important? I don't know. I don't think there's anything more important than the Constitution as far as, law enforcement is concerned. So as far as that, I don't know, but we can go back to myself, cutting my pay, putting that back in. I know it's not a lot of money compared to, added into 108 million, but I know that the budget will probably decrease. You hear defunding the police all the time.
Sure.
And every single member on the council, they're all Democrats. All 7 are Democrats.
Delightful.
They're up for election. So if anyone is willing to run, that would be wonderful. We need some strong conservatives in there. I think it should be 50-50, at least.
Imagine.
Wouldn't that be great? But yeah, I mean, until I get a look at those books and until I see how much we are working with, if it has been reduced, which I'm assuming it's going to be, it's hard to answer.
That's fair enough. One of the things I noticed going in is I used to be a martial arts instructor, ran a couple of studios. I also was a law enforcement instructor, and I was also a military subcontractor, and I trained military units out of SOCOM, JSOC.
Are you asking for a job, Scott?
She said it.
Kidding.
You can hold her to it if she gets elected. No, what I'm not trying to brag either.
No, I love it. No.
But
Keep
it's
it
relevant
coming.
to my next question.
Yeah.
I noticed that going into the academy, it was pathetic.
Yeah.
The physical side was pathetic.
Absolutely.
And then when it got to the jail side, it was even worse. The
It's
standards
a
were so horrifically low
Yes.
that we had morbidly obese women who couldn't do a single push-up who were still getting certified.
Yep.
And they're being put in life-threatening situations surrounded by 56 inmates at 12 hours at a stretch.
Look who's being put in SWAT.
Well,
look who's being put in SWAT. Okay, you're looking at people who have zero business being on SWAT. Okay, and they're being placed there because of who they know.
It's
right?
just a specialty position,
or they're being placed there because, oh, this is going to look better if this female is put here, or if this, tall male is put here, or whatever, going by,
optics.
Yes, optics.
That's wildly inappropriate given the
circumstances.
So,
as far as the, the physical agility and bringing back, my goal is to bring back the eliteness of the Wake County Sheriff's Office. I mean, back in the day, you should be proud of where you are. You should be, you shouldn't just be handed a badge and a gun and, and a uniform and here, have at it.
Yeah.
It should not happen that way. There's something, you're familiar with the United States Marine Corps, yeah. I assume. Those are an elite group. You're proud to be, the few, the proud, the Marines, right?
Right.
I would really like to implement something along those lines as far as preparing people to go out and protect and serve.
Well, so adding something like maybe mandatory jujitsu training as opposed to this ridiculous scat crap they've been doing.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Okay. Jujitsu training. We did that when I was in the police academy. We were trained in many different forms of, protecting ourselves, protecting others, how someone my size can take down someone your size. I'm not exactly tall. How tall are you?
6'3".
Okay. I'm 5'2", and I could probably maybe I still got it. I don't know.
All right. Well, we're going to get the pads out.
Oh yeah. Hold on. Yeah.
We're going to make her prove it. But not right now though. So, okay. Well, that's good to know. I mean, that's something that I've been yada about for like a decade now.
Yeah.
Is that all officers, it doesn't matter whether it's Wake County or somewhere in Russia, they should all know something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They should all have some wrestling training. This scat stuff that we trained in was pathetic.
It's a joke.
And we didn't get enough time in it either, even to make it effective.
No.
They had a bunch of people who were wildly out of shape.
And let me ask you this. Did they have you take refresher course? Did they have you do anything to, freshen up your mind, freshen up your body? No. So no. I mean, that's going to be something
even the STAR facility, when it was still open, was the premier training facility in Los Angeles County.
Yeah.
And I trained out there when I was still a H2H instructor, which means we would train the STAR cadets as they came in, and we teach them Krav Maga and some other things.
Yeah.
And they were only required to do something like 4 hours a year of review, hands-on training. And that might include pew-pew. So what people expect out of police officers and what they're actually equipped to do are wildly different.
Yes.
And so the only officers that I've noticed that really can take it to a dangerous suspect and get them under control safely without causing undue harm and unnecessary damage to them are the ones who just religiously go and train on the side.
On their own
time.
And at their own cost.
Yep. Right. Would you be able to give them those resources, and would that be a priority to you?
100%.
All right. Very cool. Another question too, speaking of kind of from the officer's perspectives on things, not just my own, but many others that I've talked to. And I think this is something that most people wouldn't argue with. Many officers across the country are kind of concerned that the administrations, Wake County and others, they don't have their backs. And so given all this anti-police rhetoric that's kind of sweeping the nation and has been for several years, what will you do specifically to restore officer confidence here?
Well, I can tell you right now that the morale at the sheriff's office is so low.
I know.
That I think people are they're willing to go be Walmart greeters. Okay. This is how low the morale is.
I top coat concrete now.
You do what?
I top coat concrete now.
And you just left 3 months ago, right?
Approximately, yeah.
Yep. And you know that the revolving door is there within the jail. And the jail is one of the most important aspects of the sheriff's office.
Sure.
Right. And look how many resources we're burning money by retraining people to come in and then only to leave 6 months later.
Well, they can't even keep them in the academy. Half of them drop out after the first couple of weeks.
Right. Okay. So there's got to be some incentive, right? There's got to be some incentive there. Like you said, promotions, things like that. When you find drugs, there's got to be some incentive there. I'm not saying give you a key to the city or anything like that, but when there's no incentive and there's no, that a boy, job well done, that just, it brings you down. Sure. When there's no handshake or a pat on the back when you do something, and any acknowledgement of a job well done and I think that is a big problem in what's happening there.
Well, specifically too, one of the biggest issues that it seems officers have is that they feel like their hands are tied.
Yes.
That the
inmates have more rights.
The inmates have more rights than they do. And not just that, but the people on the street. I'm seeing officers that are afraid to engage.
Yes, they are.
They're afraid to go to certain neighborhoods because they're afraid of the news report that's going to inevitably come out.
Absolutely.
So how are you going to ameliorate some of those issues for them?
Well, for one, they're going to know that I have their back. I mean, that's unless they do something that is out of the scope of what a law enforcement officer is supposed to do, okay? Unless they, if something like that were to take place, okay, if it's something is unjustified on their side, that will be handled, of course. But when they're justified, which most of the time they are, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I think I might get into a shooting today. I think I'm going to go ahead and pull over some, random dude and harass this guy and do, no one does that. We all want to go home, right? No one wants anything bad to happen to themselves or to a citizen. They just don't, 99% of the time. So I think my position as sheriff is just to let them know that I do have their back and that they don't have to worry and look over their shoulder and wonder, am I going to get in trouble for this? Should I pull this guy over? Am I going to, they have to know that they can do their job and that they can do it safely and effectively.
Well, sounds good to me. We're burning time, so I'm going to let this come to an end. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in here and answer these questions.
No, absolutely.
Again,
Anytime.
go ahead and announce yourself to the world here. We'll give you 30 seconds just to kind of maybe touch on something we hadn't discussed or brought up in the questions.
Yeah, I do. I am Stephanie Hopkins. I am running for Wake County Sheriff. I'm a mom. I have 3 sons. Hi, kids. And I have a grandson. Have a husband. Hi, Nick. I just wanted to touch base on the jail just a little bit more. Like you said, the inmates have more rights than than the detention officers that are working in there. And just really quickly, I want to make it to where, because the same inmates just keep coming back and coming back.
A lot of repeat customers.
A lot of repeat customers, right? So we need to make it uncomfortable for them. It needs to be uncomfortable. And I plan on doing that. The canteen, you don't need to eat honey buns all day. Okay. So necessities only. And as far as getting cards, treats and stuff like that in the mail, because a lot of drugs slip through.
Right, quite a bit.
Because, again, it goes back to training. And a lot of these detention officers, they don't know what to look for.
And corruption.
And corruption. Absolutely. There's a lot of corruption involved with officers. I know I worked at Central Prison. So I think that we need to just make it uncomfortable, and they need to understand who's in charge. It's not them. And because, a lot of these, a lot of jails are ran by inmates. Yeah. They're ran by inmates, and they need to understand that it's not going to be that way under my administration.
Might have kept my job if that was the administration I worked under. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And hopefully the election goes well for you. But we'll put this out there on our show that's coming up soon. And hopefully people will be more familiar with your name after that.
I hope so too.
And thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks.